Chapter 11. Teeth. It was morning, but the sun hadn't yet risen when GA and the others set out. This pre-dawn start wasn't completely necessary, but Fletch was an early riser. Alariana was still asleep by the time they left. Even so, they were held up because Gina had got confused with their plan and needed reminding, and then because GA was very difficult to wake up. The first thing they had to do, as instructed in capital letters by their enthusiastic new guide, was to gather as much rope as they could and make torches. The underground river they were going to explore would be unnavigable on their own. Beneath the island was a maze of passages all carved by the ever-flowing stream, and only one would lead to the Gorma Solsha. Alariana had left out 2 reed baskets with straps so they could carry them on their backs and still have free use of their arms. After a small and hasty breakfast, though it was the best they'd had in days, they slipped out of the house into the morning drizzle. They kept their tails hidden and GA stayed translucent until the last of the houses were out of sight. Then they directed their route towards the shoreline, planning to skirt its edge until they came back to the beach they had landed on the day before. They could see the hazy outline of the ship rolling gently in the waves on the outskirts of the harbour, its sails tacked in and all its lights out. The sun had edged its way, unseen behind the thick veil of clouds, into the sky by the time they reached the beach. Their little boat was still as well concealed as when they had left it. Fletch was extremely excited to see it emerge from the undergrowth. He was no help whatsoever at hauling it down to the water, dancing around them and loudly explaining how he'd never been allowed in boats before, for, oh, so many clearly unfair reasons. GA heard Hono quietly suggest they tie him up with the rope, but somehow this never happened. Launching the boat caused a lot of confusion. Adrian somehow managed to get left on the beach on the first attempt, and the boat nearly drifted away empty on the second. Finally, they managed to get everyone in and push the boat into open water. They were headed round the coastline to the other side of the island where, according to Fletch, they would find the outlet of the underground river flowing out of the earth and into the sea. They took it in turns to row and distract Fletch, whose constant fidgeting threatened to capsize the boat. GA glided beside them, watching the progress of the strange sea creatures that occasionally kept them company. These would bob just below the surface, rising almost close enough to see their shining pale colours before fading back into the murky green world beneath them. After several miles, these creatures appeared less, and GA saw they were approaching a rift in the shoreline. There the trees opened up to reveal a narrow channel, where a swollen river spilled into the sea. After several clumsy efforts, they guided the boat out of the grasp of the waves and headed against the current upriver. Fed by all the extra rain coming off the hills, its brown waters lapped over the banks and puddled around the roots of trees. Their course was draped with a tangle of overhanging branches and creepers, while reeds, ferns, grasses and rushes rose from thick, marshy beds. The forest stayed silent, except for the monotonous drip-drop of the rain and the sound of the oars dipping into the water. It was a tight squeeze, and, more than once, they managed to get wedged into a nest of greenery by the bank and had to shove themselves loose with the oars. The river had carved its channel straight through the heart of the forest, and as they approached the island's hills, dark, earthen walls began to rise out of the forest on either side, laced with a dangling array of vegetation that dribbled into the murky river. These walls gradually locked together into hard, ragged stone that loomed over their heads until the treetops were almost obscured from view. The river took a slight turn and then disappeared under a shelf of rock into a low, dark tunnel. They paused at its mouth, holding the boat as steady as they could against the current.
"All right, Fletch, you're the guide. What now?"
asked Adrian.
"I think,"
said Fletch, surveying them with a magisterial gaze,
"Blue Eyes here should go in front. Glow in the dark, light the way and do exactly what I tell you."
"What about the torches?"
asked Hono, stifling a yawn. He was not an early riser.
"They're not going to last the whole time we're in there, stupid. Besides,"
Fletch gestured through GA,
"he's made of nothing, so he can float ahead and not hit anything. Oh, look at his little face!"
GA scowled as Fletch flapped his arms through him. He knew hitting a small person was very, very wrong, but all the same...
"Do as he says, GA,"
said Adrian wearily.
"Fletch, lead on."
GA savoured 3 more seconds of glowering, then ducked into the mouth of the cave. To begin with, his blue luminosity didn't make much difference as daylight filtered through from outside. But very soon, dark shadows overtook them, and his glow illuminated the subterranean tunnel with the river sliding thick and dark beneath them. "Come on," he called, unconsciously talking quietly in the darkness. Very cautiously, the others pushed the boat into the tunnel.
"Not there, stupid!"
ordered Fletch, shoving the boat away from the wall.
"And not too close to the other side either."
Dominator's going to seem like a dream after this one,
EA muttered to Abrian, who sniggered.
"Shush! No talking now except me,"
said Fletch.
"I'm guiding."
The cave mouth was now only a small semicircle behind them, and GA was quickly becoming the only thing they could see. As their eyes gradually adjusted in the gloom, they saw the walls were knobbled all over with odd shapes, rubbed smooth by the flow of water. The roof was low, with intimidating, thin spears of stone hanging from it. The shadows of these moved as if on a sundial, their tips constantly readjusting their aim as GA's light moved past. Despite Fletcher's guidance, the Feldnotion's second-rate rowing meant the boat drifted too close to the walls, jarring its sides with a horrible, splintering echo. Many times, the current turned the boat's nose about, and to their dismay they found themselves facing in the opposite direction. Fletch stopped finding this funny after the 3rd time. They must have covered several miles before the river widened, grew a little shallower, and the current became easier to deal with.
"All right, Ghosty, there's a hidden turn coming up,"
instructed Fletch.
"Ignore it and go right."
GA did as he was told and flew to the right.
"Oh, wait! It wasn't this one, it's the next one,"
said Fletch casually. So they pulled the boat onwards with GA gliding along under the ceiling. Fletch was standing at the prow, looking all around as if every line and stone was a map. He seemed to be listening for something. Then suddenly he called out.
No, it was the other one. Go back."
The Feldnotions groaned.
Make up your mind,
said Honno, steering the boat away from the walls as they turned.
"It gets narrow that way, then slips into a waterfall,"
said Fletch.
"It goes down a great big shaft that's so deep you'll never find the bottom."
And you're sure the waterfall's not down the first route?
Said EA wearily.
"Oi!"
Fletch sat down hard in the boat and glared at him.
"I am not stupid. I know exactly what I'm doing, all right? Now get rowing. Where's our light gone?"
"GA?" called Gina as she realised they were sitting in the dark. After a moment, GA's light reappeared as he flew out of the tunnel they had just abandoned. "Sorry," he said, gliding to a halt above them. "I was getting a look at the waterfall. It really is there, and it really does go as deep as Fletch says it does."
You shouldn't go peering over big drops like that,
said EA, looking reproachfully at his twin.
Where's your sense of danger?
"Hello, EA. Nice to meet you. I'm a ghost," said GA. "A drop like that's hardly going to damage me."
It still matters,
mumbled EA, looking wounded.
"Whoa! Wait, you're actually related?"
said Fletch, goggling at the pair of them.
"How does that work? How come one of you is dead and the other is just stupid?"
Don't get them started, Fletch,
said Honno.
We haven't got time for that story. Just show us the way.
GA flew in front again as they retraced their route until they took the correct passage. The river was more like a stream now, though it was still overloaded with rainwater that had seeped through the hills. Its noise echoed off the walls like a shower of applause, as if everyone clapping had wet hands. Quite abruptly, the noise softened as the boat rounded a gentle bend and the tunnel broadened, opening out into a small cavern. The bed of the stream was now so close to the boat they could see the pebbles at the bottom, rippling and wobbling in GA's cold light. Eventually the stream grew so shallow they had to disembark and haul the boat onto a shelf of dry land the water curved round, like a beach. From here onwards they would have to go on foot. Once they were out of the boat with their feet on the slippery floor, the enormity of the cave crept up on them. It was an uneasy feeling as the weight of the island hung above their heads and they stood inside its living interior. Every line and every crack GA's light illuminated was carved with an uncountable, lonely expanse of age and time. This place was older than the cliffs of Nausea or the trees of Feldnor. It looked back to a time when magic and mountains were still young, and all the secrets of their world, now hidden in the depths of history, were once laid bare on its surface. Even Fletch seemed a little quieter as he instructed them.
You want to go through the middle passage,
he said, pointing to where the beach slid away into the shadows.
The stream goes a different way underground and gets really deep, but stick to the path and you'll find it again. The Romanowicz are around that part somewhere.
Very carefully, with GA hovering just above as a light, EA tied one end of their spool of rope to a sturdy pillar of rock, making sure it wasn't tangled or knotted. This would be their guideline to help them find their way back to the boat. Meanwhile, Abrian distributed the 3 torches they had brought.
Gina, do you have the tinderbox?
Asked Honno, after rummaging through a bag and finding nothing. You say something, she said, looking up from poking at the stream.
Gina, pay attention. Did you pick up the tinderbox?
Said Honno steadily. Gina's eyebrows creased, then slowly slid into mortified realization. Was I meant to pick it up? Honno nodded, unimpressed. Oh no! Gina looked furious with herself. I really wanted to get things right this morning. I thought if I packed enough the night before, then I'd be on time. But somehow it just never happened. Then this morning I got caught up doing 100 other things, instead of that one thing I should have done. How stupid! It's all right, Gina. It happens, said GA sympathetically. Grumbled Honno, taking her torch and grasping the top with both hands. Golden yellow globules of magic blossomed around it, and gradually there was a smell of burning. Honno quickly cupped a hand around the glowing head and blew the flames into life. Abrian and Fletch lit theirs from the first, while GA and EA hung back. The twins hated fire. Honno shook the last few blobs of yellow magic from his fingers and handed the torch back to Gina.
That ought to do,
he said.
Just remember you said you wouldn't be a nuisance. Make the effort next time.
Gina took the torch back and gave him a hard smack on the head with it. Seizing one of the rush baskets and slinging it over her shoulders, she marched into the middle passage and disappeared.
Whoa! You can't just go off like that!
Called Abrian.
Oh, she's in one of her moods,
said Honno, rubbing his head. It hurt a lot.
I'll follow,
said Abrian, taking up the end of the rope.
I read the Romanowicz are full of blue magic. It only makes sense that Gina and I go. We both use it.
In that case, we'll stay here, said GA. We can keep base. If there's trouble, one of you can come back following the rope. Honno can't go. He's probably concussed. Abrian nodded, silently agreeing with GA that Honno probably deserved it.
Don't touch anything you shouldn't,
EA called after Abrian's retreating form.
I know what you're like, Abrian.
Pipe down, please,
said Honno, his head throbbing now.
Don't you know you should always stay quiet in caves?
Why? Asked GA. It's a bit eerie, but it's all stone in the end, really.
My pet lives down here too, in the tunnels,
added Fletch conversationally.
Pet?
Repeated Honno. Fletch nodded as if this was perfectly obvious.
Yeah. How else would I know the way around?
Why do you keep a pet down in a cave? Asked GA.
I don't,
said Fletch.
He lives down here. It's his patch. I provide the turnips.
Turnips?
Said Honno.
Are you my echo?
Grinned Fletch.
Yes, turnips. Can't get enough of them. He sleeps nearly all day, though. We're ages away from his territory, so you won't get to see him. Sorry.
It's a he?
I call him Gadav. It means rocks,
said Fletch proudly. Very good choice, said GA, thinking of all the stony inspiration around them.
It's not got an attitude, has it?
Asked Honno. His experiences of Abrian's pets were enough. All of them bit him.
Don't look so glum,
said Fletch, patting Honno hard on the head.
Look, see, I've got a little Gadav present. I found this after I first found him.
He pulled a thread from a purse on his belt, a tooth dangling on the end, and held it up to the light in his fist. The tooth was thick, well worn, and flat along the top. All 3 failed notions looked closely. It certainly seemed benign.
I was exploring down here a couple of times ago when I found him,
Fletch explained.
There was a huge dark crack in the cave I'd never seen before, and he just waddled out of it. When I came back, the big crack had gone. Completely vanished, like it had closed up.
I thought I couldn't leave the poor little thing, so he's mine now. Sometimes I cut up the turnips for him.
Fletch went on as he took the tooth back.
Just in case he can't manage the big bits now he's a couple of teeth down.
G.A. tried to visualise some toothless old creature eating delicately sliced turnips. As for the large, dark crack or hole in the cave that vanished, G.A. had seen far too much in his life not to believe Fletch. But a part of him wondered if the grinning boy wasn't pulling their legs. He glanced back to the spool of rope as it steadily unravelled into the darkness, and his mind wandered after his friends as they crept through the stone passages into the hidden depths of the world. Further down in the tunnel, Abram was doing his best to keep up with Gina as she strode ahead. A lot of her was still full of a boiling temper, but she started to feel calmer as the dim chill of the cave surrounded them. The uneven floor was taking up more and more of their attention as the pair navigated their way over tumbles of rock. Sometimes they had to stop and climb on all fours. Then Gina would hold her torch between her teeth while Abram, who had tied the rope about his waist so he could still keep hold of his torch, silently agonised at the idea of her hair catching alight. He always felt very relieved when they reached more level ground. All around them was filled by 100 different types of silence. Echoing, hollow black silences that lurked in deep gaps in the floor and walls. The hard, pattering, cracking quiet of their footsteps, and the lazy hush of the cold air that lay like a blanket on top of everything. Slowly, a gentle scent began to sink through this blanket towards their noses. A fresh and dusty smell like the one that comes from the earth after a downpour. Only Gina and Abram would have been able to smell it. It was the scent of blue magic. Abram was the first to spot one, a minuscule blue light nestled in a feature in the rock high above them. He tugged Gina's sleeve and pointed upwards. She squinted, saw it, and turned to carry on. She was going to reach their goal, find as much Gormasolcia as she could, and get back without a single mistake. Then Honor would have to eat his words, and she was going to watch him. As they headed further through the caves, more tiny, blue glimmers of the Gormasolcia winked at them like flowers from high up alcoves, growing more frequent but always too high and difficult to reach. Abram and Gina kept their torches low to the ground to illuminate their path and to keep the surrounding stone dark enough to spot more lights. But another 20 minutes walking brought nothing new. The little clusters of Gormasolcia were firmly out of reach. Gina had nearly skinned her hands trying to reach some. Their woven baskets remained discouragingly empty. It was about this time their path was rejoined by the stream. Like Fletch had told them it would, it diverted itself onto a different, unreachable route a while back. Now they could hear it chattering beside them. Abram and Gina made their way through what remained of the rocky space. Every now and then a drip of moisture would lose its grip on the roof and fall noiselessly through the air before striking the bubbling stream with a loud clop. More and more of these water droplets seemed to be falling on them, until Gina realised the roof itself was sloping downwards, gradually extending lower and lower until she could reach up and touch it. They soon had to walk bent double. Up ahead the ceiling was so low it seemed to have slid down into the floor.
Is it a dead end?
Asked Abram. No, said Gina, feeling around the boulders at their feet. Can't you feel a draught? There must be a gap. Here, hold my torch. Lying flat on her front, Gina edged her way over a boulder until she was almost upside down.
Are you all right down there?
Whispered Abram, shining the torch over the rocks. Still beats being stuck at home, said Gina's voice gleefully from under them. Ah, I found it! Her legs wriggled as she squeezed herself through. It was an awfully tight fit. With an effort, she managed to get her head and shoulders through. Then the rest was easier. Abram followed, passing her torch to her first and then posting the baskets through, careful not to bend or crush them. He then went to post himself through, but something held him back. Looking down at the taut rope around his waist, he realised they had reached its limit.
We mustn't go much further,
he called softly.
I'm going to have to leave the rope here.
As he said this, he tied a thick knot in the end and wedged it between two of the heaviest rocks he could find.
All right, I'm coming now. Can you take my torch too?
He rolled it through the gap and Gina went to catch it, but unluckily its flame swung towards her hand and she pulled back. In that moment the torch joyfully bounced straight into the stream where it died with a merry fizzling splash. As Abram pulled himself through the gap, for whatever reason backwards, His foot kicked the second torch, sending it spinning after the first.
Catch it!
He gasped, but in half a second there was another splash, and all the light was gone. Back with the boat, G.A. was beginning to get bored of waiting. It was uncomfortable not knowing what was happening down in the tunnel. He circled the roof and, after a while, stuck his head through to see what rocks looked like from the inside, but it was nothing but dense blackness.
G.A., stop it!
G.A. pulled his head out and floated back to the ground.
If you're bored, go and find the others,
said Hono.
See if they've had any luck.
Yes, but... G.A. fiddled with his cape. They have torches.
Still scared of fire, then?
Asked Hono. G.A. nodded, a little embarrassed. Knowing nothing could physically harm him was making him far bolder than he'd ever been before. And G.A. was well aware there was nothing for him to be scared of. But fire was the one exception. It made him think of the war and the Witch of Glass Mountains. Even now, more than 50 times later, a flickering flame would conjure a flash of her face, her shaven head, and the burning wave of magical fire that had struck and killed him. E.A., who had been pacing beside the stream, watched his brother closely.
It's all right, G.A. I don't like it either,
he said. I know, said G.A. defensively. I'm not that scared of it. Just don't like going near it.
Really?
Fletch blew hard at their single torch, driving a burst of flame at G.A., who squeaked and disappeared into the air.
Oh! How'd you do that?
Gasped Fletch, searching around for G.A.
Do it again! Leave him alone,
said E.A., looking darkly at Fletch.
It's just a bit of fun,
said Fletch.
Oh, look, he's back now. What did you do?
G.A. had reappeared, apparently out of nowhere, and glared furiously at Fletch. It's a defensive response, he said irritably, when Fletch refused to stop asking him. When I'm very scared, I turn invisible. It's subconscious. Fletch snorted, wrinkling his nose.
You're indestructible. Why do you need to defend yourself?
G.A. blinked. Why did he need to do that? Well, I live with the anti-Tepid Revolution, and that's reason enough, he said at last. Fletch had hoped for a more interesting answer than this. When G.A. failed to elaborate further, he soon got bored.
Oh, no!
He called suddenly.
A flying thing! Hide, Ghosty!
And he lobbed Gadav's tooth at G.A. He had hoped the ghost would go invisible again, or maybe fall out of the air. But Fletch hadn't counted on just how many times G.A. had things sail at him while living with the ATR. Consequently, the tooth flew in a proud arc across the cave, went straight through G.A. and hit Hono hard on the head.
Ouch!
Hono rubbed his already painful forehead and picked up the tooth. Considering how dull the tooth was, it hurt a lot more than it should have done. He felt under his fringe and realised it had broken the skin. Hono, are you all right? Asked G.A., ignoring Fletch, who was howling with laughter so hard he'd started hiccuping. Hono turned the tooth over in his hand. One end, the end Fletch had held up, was flat and worn. A piece of thread had been looped through the other end, which was surprisingly large and triangular-shaped, with jagged serrated edges ending in a very mean, very sharp tip. G.A. and E.A. peered over Hono's shoulder to get a closer look and groaned. Hono stood up and hauled Fletch to his feet.
You say this?
He thrust the tooth in the boy's face.
Is for eating turnips? What?
Said Fletch, still hiccuping.
These?
Hono exposed his own failed-notion teeth.
These are for eating turnips. What are you on about? Spluttered Fletch. I've always fed Gadav turnips. I throw them to him from the sinkhole by the cliffs. I used to feed him coming up this way by the river, but he got all narky and chased me the other way. Total princess he is. You...
Hono looked like he might explode.
What about Adrian and Gina? He's a cheeky squirt, but he doesn't even stay in this part of the caves,
protested Fletch, his voice rising back to its normal level.
What do you mean, squirt? This tooth is 5 inches long, said Hono, brandishing the offending dental evidence. Fletch paused as if this hadn't properly dawned on him before. It'll be fine. They're only his baby teeth. Ow!
Adrian's head smacked the low stone ceiling as he tried to see anything in the dark.
Ugh! What is that?
Something sticky was clinging to his hair. It felt like a strand of thread, and it took some of his hair with it as he peeled it free. As he tugged it out, something on the other end of the thread flopped loose. He could feel its weight swinging in the dark. Very carefully, he felt to the end of the sticky stuff until his fingers closed around something small and tubular. It squirmed as he held it close to his eyes. A small blue light glimmered between his fingers. It was a worm, a tiny worm, but it was emitting the most enchanting blue magic Adrian had ever seen, and in such delicate amounts. It was like holding a faraway star in his hands.
Gormasolcha!
He whispered, forgetting the gloom and darkness around them.
Aren't you gorgeous?
He felt to pull at his arm. Gina had managed to stumble her way over to him.
Gina, hey, look at...
You have to come this way, Gina whispered back, sounding very insistent.
Which way?
Said Adrian, tripping as she pulled him along.
We mustn't wander too far.
The words fell pathetically out of Adrian's mouth as it dropped open. The low ceiling had turned out to be a shelf, jutting out across a much wider space. The ground sloped down towards what must have been a deep, wide bend in the stream, which was far more still and calm here. Rippling in its gentle waters was a night sky. Slowly looking up, Adrian saw the darkness above their heads was filled with the dazzling multitude of minuscule blue stars. Their soft glow was the only light to see by, too weak to illuminate the walls, but so numerous it seemed like all the tons of rock had been lifted away, revealing an infinite night sky. Adrian felt the little worm in his hand, flexing and exploring between his fingers. He handed it to Gina, who gazed at the squirming creature, then looked back to the constellations above them. No, they're really all...
Gormasolcha are worms,
whispered Adrian. They're full of blue magic, said Gina softly. They must be very powerful, even powerful enough to put a rain monster to sleep. We can't feed a load of poor worms to a monster.
No,
said Adrian.
No, we absolutely can't. But I think their slime will work just as good.
Their what?
This little worm had hold of a sticky, slimy thread. I think they must weave them or something. I've read about some types of bird doing something similar. I don't doubt the slime has just as much blue magic as the Gormasolcha themselves.
Gina felt the thread Adrian passed to her and shuddered. Ugh, it's all tacky. All right, let's try and reach some. I reckon even if we gathered half of what's in here, it would be enough. But reaching the threads of the Gormasolcha was easier said than done. Apart from the blue dots of light, Gina and Adrian could barely see their hands in front of their faces. The water just below their feet must have entered the cave through some private entrance of its own. There was no way of judging its depth, and the chamber walls was too smooth to get a decent foothold. So that ruled out climbing. In the tradition of all mysterious and important magical necessities, the Gormasolcha had picked the most difficult, nigh unreachable part of the cave. It was extremely frustrating. Just when they were thinking they would have to head back and fetch the others to come and help, Gina happened to glance at a corner of the chamber at just the right angle, and her eyes caught a glimpse of something. Then she moved and lost sight of it.
What are you doing?
Said Adrian, as Gina got down on her hands and knees, leaning out across the stream as far as she could. I thought I saw... She kept her eyes fixed on the darkness to their right. There was something blue, she was sure of it. Aha! She jumped up and felt her way to the cave wall, Adrian following close behind. Gina ran her hand along the chilly stone and shivered as her feet dipped into the stream. It wasn't very deep, though the water spilled into her shoes as she slowly felt her way through the blackness. When they had travelled about halfway across, the walls began to curve. The rock seemed to put out a great foot into the middle of the stream, cutting off their view of part of the chamber. Gina's fingers found the edge of the outcrop, and very slowly they peered around the corner. Adrian, get the basket! A mass of the Gormasolcha had spread themselves over a dark tumble of rocks that had fallen into the shallows on the opposite side of the stream. The whole thing was utterly hidden from the other bank unless you looked from just the right position. Without a second's hesitation, Gina and Adrian set to work. The worms must have been relaxing on the rocks because they were a little warmer than the surrounding stone. Their sticky strands came away easily enough, and though they could scarcely see them, they guessed the threads must have been draped all over the rocks. Abram carefully placed each one in the baskets, trying not to get stuck on them.
Right, that should be more than enough,
he said, flicking the last strand off his fingers. Great, said Gina, wiping her hands furiously on the rocks. I can't believe we got some. Let's head back. Both holding onto the baskets, they edged along the way they'd come. They could feel the cold waft of air coming through the gap as they knelt to wriggle through, but before they left they paused, taking a last look at the secret underground sky. Magic is a bio-emotional force. It was easy to take it for granted, but in its raw, natural form, shining from such tiny, benign creatures that would hardly be seen again in 100 times. It reminded them what magic really was, the colour and energy of the soul and the root of every feeling. Taking in that sight was like listening to beautiful silent music. The waters of the stream rippled. Gina and Abram were about to turn and leave when the stream rippled again, stronger this time, breaking the reflection of the lights. The water continued to shudder and small waves broke against the bank as a pile of worm-covered rocks appeared slowly from behind the outcrop. A long body covered in the blue lights crouched low to the ground. Great swathes of air were sucked in and out of deep nostrils as it sniffed the air, and its eyes were fixed on them.